Hola a todos y bienvenidos un día más al canal Crónicas de una Merodeadora. Hoy vengo con una entrevista a una autora súper cool y unos consejos sobre cómo publicar si están interesados en el mundo de Estados Unidos, que me parece bastante interesante. Les estoy haciendo este intro desde mi casa, desde mi cama y con estas pintas porque hoy no estoy grabando sino como subtitulando unas entrevistas que tenía, menos mal, porque me duele mucho la cabeza, así que perdonen esta pinta, pero tampoco quería pasar a la entrevista sin recordarles que como siempre seguimos teniendo nuestro código hermoso de Next Story que les da 45 días de libros gratis e ilimitados en esta aplicación que ya saben que les recomiendo siempre un montón, y les dejo el link para que encuentren eso en la descripción. Y pues nada, dicho esto, pues nada, voy a meter esto al video, voy a exportarlo, así que pues nada, vayan ustedes a seguir con la entrevista y nos vemos. Bye. Hola a todos y bienvenidos un día más al canal Crónicas de una Merodeadora. Hoy estoy aquí con Brigitte Kemmerer. That's how you pronounce it, right?
It is.
Okay, cool. Y hoy vamos a hablar un poco sobre sus libros, pero también quiero que conozcan de la parte de cómo funciona el proceso de publicar un libro en Estados Unidos. So, welcome to my channel, Brigitte.
Thank you. It's so lovely to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here too. First of all, I want you to introduce my viewers to your books, like the first trilogy, then this spin-off and everything. So tell them a little bit about the trilogy first.
Sure. So, again, I'm Brigitte Kemmerer. I am the author of the Cursebreaker trilogy, which starts with a very loose Beauty and the Beast retelling, which takes a girl from our world who is just a normal, ordinary teenager from Washington, D.C. in the United States of America, who thinks she sees a man kidnapping a girl off the streets and decides she is going to intervene. And unfortunately what happens is she gets kind of transported into this fairy tale kingdom where she discovers a prince has been cursed to relive the same autumn over and over again until he can convince a girl to fall in love with him. Our girl Harper wants nothing to do with curses or princes or any of this fairy tale stuff. She just wants to get home, but really the only way out is to fall in love. And I loved this trilogy, I loved writing it, and I loved that so many readers were able to discover it all over the world. I do have another trilogy that is not yet complete.
Okay.
In the United States, it's called Defy the Night. Here it is El Elixir de Flor de Luna. The first book is out here, and this series is about a kingdom that is overrun by an illness, and our main character is a girl named Tessa, who is an apothecary by day, and at night she puts on a mask and turns into an outlaw because the only cure for this illness is very, very expensive. And along with her best friend, a boy named Weston, they break into the homes of the wealthy to steal medicine and give it to those who can't afford it, until one day poor Weston does not return from the supply run, so Tessa sets off to see what became of him and ends up breaking into the palace only to discover everything she thought she knew about the illness, about the kingdom, about pretty much all of it might not necessarily be true, and if she really wants to help her people, she might have to start a revolution.
Oh, just a casual Tuesday.
Just exactly.
Yeah, right?
Who doesn't like to just start a revolution? Forjemos Estrellas de Plata is forging silver into stars in the United States. This one is probably one of my favorite books I've ever read. This is a book that is starting a trilogy. It is set in the world of the Cursebreakers, but if someone has not read that trilogy, they do not need to read it. They can absolutely start here. It's set 4 years following that trilogy. It is about a boy and girl named Jax and Callan who are best friends, and they live in this poor border town between Emberfall and Sill Shallow, and they have very complex feelings about the king and his magic and everything that is going on, until one day 2 men ride into town. One is Lord Tycho, who readers of the Cursebreaker series might be familiar with. Yes. And Lord Tycho works for the king, and he is very loyal to him. And the other man who rides into town is named Lord Alec, and he absolutely hates the king. Jax and Callan, unfortunately, both get kind of wound up with both of these men, and a little bit of a spy plot and some treason, little light treason.
Yeah, who doesn't like that?
And both end up on opposite sides of a war.
Oh, wow.
And I really loved writing this story, and I love that readers in Spanish language markets are beginning to discover it.
How's the process of publishing a book? in the US? I mean, from the moment you're writing it, so and you're looking for agents or querying or all these things. It was like specifically your process, like let's say for your first book.
So, you know, the process is super easy. No, I'm kidding. It is
all the people like, what?
It is torturous and long and filled with years and years of rejection. You know, in the United States, well, pretty much everywhere now, there are two paths to publication. You can go the route of traditional publishing, which is what I did, where you need to find an agent, and then the agent is the person who works on your behalf to try to sell your book to a traditional publisher, and that is somebody who helps develop your book, helps you, makes the cover, helps edit the book, helps market your book and advertise it, and then there's also self-publishing, which unfortunately I don't have any familiarity with, where all of that kind of thing falls on the author. But for traditional publishing, you know, it took me writing several books over several years, and years and years and years of rejection before I ever found a literary agent. And even once I found that literary agent, that first book that they wanted to sell for me did not sell. So then I had to go back to the drawing board and write another book, and then that one eventually became my first published novel.
Okay. Which one was like the curse one, like in number of books?
A Curse So Dark and Lonely was my 9th published novel.
Let's say that like your first rejections come from the agents themselves, not the publishers. So
right.
How do you handle that? How do you keep like looking for an agent without giving up and thinking just like, oh, what I write, it's just not worth it?
Really hard, you know, and sometimes you just have to want it so badly that you're not willing to stop trying, you know, and sometimes you're not ready, and that's really hard to accept. And looking back, I know that with those early books, I absolutely was not ready, and it's just a matter of keeping on trying and improving your craft and improving your craft and improving your craft. And Stephanie Garber, who writes the Caramel series, she had a really great story. We did an event together last year. She had a wonderful story about how so many people give up when they're like 95% of the way there. And you just really have to that's really kind of, when you were at that point where you're like, I can't take it anymore, that's almost the sign that you just need to push a little harder. Yes.
When you're like getting your manuscript to the agents and everything, how do you present that? Because I think that you have to like give them a summary or some chapters or even sometimes like the whole book. How do you do that, or what advice would you give for people who want to start like querying?
So you definitely, if it's your first book, you want to make sure the entire manuscript is fully written. You want to make it as polished as you possibly can. You know, some authors feel like you absolutely have to hire an editor and pay for an editor yourself. You do not have to. It's not a requirement. That is really going to come down to the individual author and what they feel comfortable doing. Once you have that together, there are a ton of online resources for how to write a query letter. I hear from authors all the time saying, can you help me? Can you take a look at my query letter? Can you give me some advice? I'm always happy if I have time to answer questions about query letters, especially if somebody is just a little bit stuck, or if they've been trying and something just isn't working. I'm happy to take a look. Once that query letter is together, then do some research into the agents. You know, there are some agents that only do crime fiction. Okay. You don't want to send them your YA fantasy.
Yeah,
and just from there, start with small batches. If you get responses, you know, it always makes me sad when somebody says, I sent out 50 queries the first weekend, because then you might burn through it. And then once you do it, you've kind of closed that door to those 50 people.
Do you have to pay for an agent?
No, never pay for an agent if someone wants your money.
Very important point.
No, an agent makes their money by taking a cut from what you make from publishing.
In the first stages of becoming a writer, how do you balance writing with keeping like a real world job?
I was not able to quit my day job for several years, you know, until writing kind of got to a point where I was able to do that. It's really hard. You know, I used to have to write very early in the morning or very late at night. I think the most important thing is to, especially for women, is to really treat it like a job, like a second job. Even before you're published, there are so many people who treat it like a hobby that can just be pushed to the side. If someone really wants to be an author and to be paid for it and to make a living doing it, you have to really take it seriously and look at it like a real job. And right from the beginning, I would tell my husband, I'm going to go to the library or I'm going to go to the coffee shop. I'm going to go write for 2 hours. And I would go.
Do not call me.
Yeah, yes, yes. And I think because I took it seriously, he took it seriously. But if I had a different attitude, like, oh, I don't need to go tonight.
Yeah.
You can't do that with a real job.
What's your favorite part of the process, like working with a publisher?
I love working with publicity and like hearing about the different things that they're doing to, both advertise your book and doing things like this, being able, especially once your career grows, being able to go on tour and just learning about different things that they're going to do. Love getting your first cover.
Oh yeah.
Getting the cover is just always amazing. Working with an editor, I love my editor.
Tell them how many years it took you to go out on an international tour so they can know how many years of hard work are behind that.
Last year was my 10-year anniversary of being published.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And that was my first international tour, and even before, and that was just 10 years of being published. And before that, it was easily, my first book came out in 2012.
Oh.
I first started querying in 2007.
Oh wow. Yeah.
So,
it's
long
a long road.
time, long time.
Which is the most valuable advice you've gotten to be in this publishing and writing world?
Really to just be kind to everyone that you encounter, and that the people that you meet on the way up are the same people you meet on the way down, and to, treat everybody with respect and dignity and kindness.
So be nice.
Yes.
Except to your characters.
Yes, torture those characters.
Yes. Okay, so thank you so much for being here on my channel.
Thank you.
I will make sure to subtitle this and tag you.